Welcome to Team 1's final project. We decided to do our project on the Orlando, Florida nightclub shooting. Over this presentation, we will provide you with an insight on how this event was determined to be an act of terrorism, and as well as the possible reasoning from the shooter's point of view. First, Jamie Hogan will explain the historical context of the action and the events leading up to the shooting. After that, Holly Shell will provide a possible reasoning on why the shooter decided to act out in the manner he did. Sarah Campos will then try to explain the reasoning from the shooter's point of view. This event was extremely difficult among us all, and we as a group decided not to mention the shooter's name throughout our presentation.
For Project D, Analysis of an Act of Terrorism, I will be explaining the historical context for the action, including relevant events leading up to the action. In this case, it is the Orlando, Florida nightclub shooting on June 12th, 2016. We are going to be looking at the criteria of jus ad bellum according to Brimlow as he outlines in Chapter 4. Jus ad bellum has 6 demands that need to be met before going to war. And in an act of terrorism, it's a little different to explain, but the demands should still be met according to the teachings of this class. Number 1 is just cause. Number 2 is the right intention. Number 3 is you must be competent and designated authorities who may declare war. Number 4 says it should be last resort. Number 5, high probability of success. And number 6, the overall good must be proportionally greater than the death. We will analyze this in the next slides. For the demand of just cause in jus ad bellum, the FBI officials say that the 29-year-old, who we will not be naming in this PowerPoint, he will be referred to as the shooter, was killed by police, but he appeared to be leaning towards radical Islamist ideology, although it was not clear whether the attack was a case of domestic or international terrorism. So the father of the shooter says it had nothing to do with religion, but it has emerged that the father also has a television show on a California-based channel that expresses anti-Pakistani government views and sympathy for the Afghan Taliban. And this does make me wonder how much the son knew about this, how much the shooter was involved, and if his views were taken into account. The attack appeared to be homegrown terrorism carried out by legally purchased firearms, and that there wasn't any evidence the attacker was under direction from a terrorist network or carrying out any group's larger plot, although he did say that he was part of ISIS. So the second demand of jus ad bellum is right intention. On his mind, he may have had the right intention, but as a terrorist act, we do not believe it's the right intention. The father of the shooter said he had become very angry after seeing 2 men kissing in downtown Miami, but there were also reports that the shooter himself had used gay dating apps and was a regular at the club where he carried out the massacre. The shooter's ex-wife said he was disturbed and violent, but showed no signs of radicalization. Former colleagues complained that he boasted of family links to terror groups, but the 2 organizations he mentioned, Al-Qaeda and Hezbollah, are actually rivals. So when he brings in the right intention of using ISIS and the terrorism groups behind him, in my personal view, I think that he was just angry about homosexuality. Thus, why he chose the Orlando gay nightclub to shoot. The third demand in jus ad bellum is to be competent and designated authorities who may declare war. And this is going to be a short because I think we can all agree that the shooter was not in his right mind, so he could not be considered competent, and he is not a designated authority who may declare war. The fourth demand for jus ad bellum is last resort. The shooter had called 911 and referred to the 2013 Boston Marathon bombers, and in his mind, he was exacting his revenge for their treatment. He may have considered this last resort. Some witnesses said they recognized the shooter as a former patron of Pulse and a user of gay social media, raising the possibility that he was homosexual or was struggling with his sexuality and its implications on his religious beliefs. Whether he thought either one of these was a last resort could be, we still don't know. The fifth demand for Just Ad Bellum is there should be a high probability of success. And obviously there was a high success of the shooting here. The shooter had visited the nightclub numerous times, and he knew that his shooting would carry out a high degree of success. So it was believed that he gained the trust of the staff to do this, and he did so in a very violent manner. The sixth and final demand of Just Ad Bellum is that overall good must be proportionally greater than the death. So it's difficult to think of this act of terrorism in the Just Ad Bellum demands because as a person with no ill intentions to others that are different than me, I see no good in this that is greater than death. Personally, I mean, the Just Ad Bellum demands are kind of archaic, and in this world and the world of terrorism, I don't see that they can really fit into it, except that maybe number 5 of the high probability of success. But can we really think of terrorism as a demand to go to war or a just cause? That's something to think about.
What is terrorism? Terrorism is defined as the unlawful use of violence and intimidation, specifically against civilians, in the pursuit of political aims. In other words, terrorism is used to create terror or fear in people to typically gain a political or religious gain. Key elements of terrorism. First, violence. The threat of harm or death is an essential factor in terrorism. The danger presented is most often to people and property. Most incidents of terrorism at least involve the possibility of a significant loss of life. Second, civilian targets. Unlike in standard warfare, terrorism is generally aimed at civilian targets. This is one of the reasons fear is so involved. The general population is not safe from a terrorist attack. The goal is to send a clear message that the political or religious beliefs of the people will not be tolerated, and to motivate their leaders to succumb to the demands of the terrorist organization. Third, fear. The goal is to strike terror into the minds of a victim. Terrorism is often thought of as a psychological warfare because it is done to intimidate people and cause them to cooperate out of fear of further retaliation. That is why terrorist attacks tend to be done on a large scale, to impact as many people as possible, such as the shooting in Orlando. Fourth, political and religious cause. Some people argue that terrorism is done strictly for political reasons. The overthrow of current leadership or the destruction of a political enemy is commonly at the root of a terrorist attack. Many feel that terrorism is often motivated by religious beliefs as well. Militant groups who believe that other religions are heretical may use violence to try and destroy their followers. What made the Orlando shooting a terrorist act? The shooter pledged his ISIS allegiance during the attack when he called 911. During the standoff with police officers, he also told a hostage negotiator that he was upset about the death of a top Islamic State operative, referring to the death of Abu Wahib, one of the top leaders in the terrorist group. The shooter then goes on to tell the negotiator that the death of Wahib was what triggered the shooting, which has been the deadliest mass shooting in American history. The shooting killed 49 people and injured another 53 at Pulse Nightclub in Orlando. This particular terrorist attack included violence, instilling fear in others, charged by religion, and went after innocent civilians. Next, we will compare several different terrorist attacks with the Orlando shooting. The shooting at the Charleston Church in South Carolina took place June 17, 2015, by a 21-year-old white supremacist. There were many signs that he was going to do something unimaginable, but they fell on deaf ears. This act of terrorism included violence, civilian targets that had not done anything wrong, had religious ties for both the shooter and the victims, and most definitely instilled fear into a community of faith, much like the Orlando shooting. We can all remember exactly where we were when we heard about the first plane crashing into the North Tower of the World Trade Center in New York. Not very many people will forget right where they're standing when they heard the news. This terrorist act was committed by Islamic terrorists from Saudi Arabia and other Arab nations and was in retaliation of the United States' support of Israel and our continued presence in the Middle East. This attack once again included violence, civilian targets, and even though I would not like to admit it, it definitely instilled fear into people and included political ties between the United States and Saudi Arabia. The Boston Marathon bombing took place April 19, 2013, which included two brothers that set off pressure cooker-type bombs at the finish line of the Boston Marathon. The common theme that is occurring throughout these four terrorist attacks is that each one of them include all four categories that we have been discussing: violence, civilian targets, to instill fear in others, and all have either political or religious ties to each of them.
Just Ed Billum, shooter's perspective. There truly is no just cause in this case. There is only information that is pulled post-attack that ISIS is trying to take credit for the shooter's actions. As for why the shooter chose the Pulse nightclub, is still unclear. As for the right intentions, from the shooter's perspective, the shooter clearly was thinking only of his religious beliefs on that homosexuality was an act of an ultimate sin. Although there was rumors that the shooter may have been gay himself, this may have intensified his actions. The shooter may have acted out in fear and hatred for his own actions, and to cover such sinful acts, he staged it to be a terrorist attack. The competent and designated authorities may declare war section of the Just Ed Billum's shooter's perspective is just as Jamie said earlier in the presentation. The shooter was clearly not in the right state of mind. He also was not in any authoritative role to be able to declare such actions. As a mentally unstable person, he may have thought that he, as a member of his religion, had the right to commit such actions. The competent and designated authorities may declare war section of the Just Ed Billum's shooter's perspective is just as Jamie said earlier in the presentation. The shooter was clearly not in the right state of mind. He also was not in any authoritative role to be able to declare such actions. As a mentally unstable person, he may have thought that he, as a member of his religion, had the right to commit such actions. High probability of success through the shooter's perspective. The shooter went to the nightclub with enough ammunition to kill everyone in the nightclub at the time. To him, this may have been considered success. But the question still remains. What was his goal? What did he want everyone to understand? We still do not have the answer. Overall good must be proportionally greater than death, in the Just Ed Billum shooter's perspective. The only rational thought on this is if the shooter thought that good would come from this and that everyone would turn against homosexuality and go back to thinking it was a sinful act. He may have thought that killing so many gay men and women that it would relieve him of his previous sinful acts. Although the shooter's actions were to try and separate and bring hatred to this world, his actions only brought us closer together. To pay respect to all of those who lost their life due to one person's actions, we would like to close with a video from CNN reading the names of those who passed.
There are more than a list of names. There are people who loved and were loved. There are people who had families and friends and dreams. And the truth is, we don't know much about some of them. We want you to hear their names and a little bit about who they were. Edward Sotomayor, Jr. He worked at a travel agency that catered to the gay community. His family says he was witty, charming, and that he always left things better than he found them. He was 34 years old. Stanley Almodovar III. He was a pharmacy technician. He was the last video that we saw of him was posted on social media that showed him laughing and singing on the way to that nightclub. He was just 23. Luis Omar Ocasio Capo. He was a dancer and a barista. He was just 20 years old. Luis Vielma. He worked at the Harry Potter ride at Universal Orlando. He was just 22. Juan Ramon Guerrero, his cousin said Juan came out to his family just this year and was afraid they might not accept him, but they did, and they embraced his boyfriend as well. He was 22. Christopher Andrew Leonone, known as Drew, he was Juan's boyfriend, and his mom says he established the Gay-Straight Alliance at his high school. He was 32 years old. Eric Ivan Ortiz Rivera, a friend says he was always willing to help everybody and sacrificed a lot for his family. He was 36. Peter O. Gonzalez Cruz, he worked at a UPS store, memorized apparently all the regular customers' names. He could make anyone smile, his friend said. He was just 22. Kimberly KJ Morris moved from Hawaii to Florida just a few months ago to help her mother and her grandmother. She was a bouncer at Pulse Nightclub. She was 37. Eddie Justice was an accountant who texted his mother from the club, texted his mother saying, "Mommy, I love you." He was 30. Enrique Rios, a friend says he was cool and a funny dude who could tell people, don't let the world hold you back from your dreams. He was 25. Anthony Luis Laureano Dizla, a talented dancer born in Puerto Rico, he was 25. Jonathan Antonio Camui Vega, he worked for Telemundo, first in Puerto Rico and then in Orlando. He was just about to turn 25. Corey James Connell was a student at Valencia Community College and hoped to become a firefighter. He was 21. Mercedes Marisol Flores, her father says she was a happy girl who had so many dreams. She was 26. Dianca Deirdre Drayden, her family called her Dee Dee. She was a bartender at Pulse. She was just 32. Miguel Angel Honorato managed a Mexican restaurant. A colleague says he was an excellent boss and a good friend. He was 30. Jason Benjamin Josephat, a student at Southern Technical College, where a faculty member calls him a sweet kid with a bright future. He was 19. Darrell Roman Burt II was a financial aid officer at Kaiser University, was passionate about volunteer work. He was 29. Jean Carlos Mendez Perez was a perfume salesman. Apparently hit the gym almost every day, and his friend said he was always happy. He was 35. Perez's longtime partner, Luis Daniel Wilson Leon, grew up in a small town in Puerto Rico and was a shoe store manager. He was 37. They died together. Frankie Jimmy de Jesus Velasquez, a professional dancer specializing in a traditional folk dance of his native Puerto Rico. He was 50. Amanda Alvear, she was a nursing student at the University of South Florida, was 25. Martin Benitez Torres, he was a college student in Puerto Rico visiting family in Orlando. He was 33. Juan Chavez Martinez, his co-workers at a hotel say he was a kind, a loving person. He was just 25. Gerald Arthur Wright worked at Disney World. The co-worker says he was wonderful with the guests. He was always smiling. He was 31. Leroy Valentin Fernandez worked leasing apartments. A co-worker says he sang Adele in the office until they couldn't take it anymore. He was 25. Tevin Eugene Crosby, dedicated, hard-working business owner from Michigan. He was just 25. Brenda Lee Marquez McCool, she had 11 kids, beat cancer twice, and often went dancing at Pulse with her gay son. She supported him that much. She was 49. Her son survived the shooting. Angel El Candelario Padro recently moved to Orlando. He was new here. He had just started a new job as a technician at the Florida Retina Institute. He was 28. Gilberto Ramon Silva Menendez was studying healthcare management. His family says that he was the light and life of all family gatherings. He was 25. Javier Jorge Reyes was a salesman at Gucci. Friends say he was always positive. He was humble, a lovely friend. He was 40. Shane Evan Tomlinson was a gifted singer who performed at weddings and clubs, was 33. Simone Adrian Carrillo Fernandez worked at McDonald's, where he brought in birthday cakes for his co-workers, and had just gotten back from a trip to Niagara Falls with his partner. He was 31. Oscar Aracena Montero was the Simon's partner. He was 26. They also died together. Rodolfo Ayala worked at a blood donation center, was a Puerto Rican native, loved to dance. He was 33 years old. Frank Hernandez, he worked at a Calvin Klein store, was a great brother and had no gender tattooed on his arm. He was 27. Xavier Emmanuel Serrano Rosado was a dancer, described as hardworking and friendly, proud of his son. He was 33. Akira Monet Murray, she recently graduated from high school, was planning to go to Mercyhurst University and play basketball. She was just 18. And Christopher Joseph Sanfeliz worked at a bank, was said to be the most positive guy around, was just 24-year-old. Luis Daniel Conde was a makeup artist, co-owned a salon with his partner. He was 39. Juan P. Rivera Velasquez, he was the partner to Luis. He was 37. Antonio Devon Brown was a captain in the, was a captain in the U.S. Army Reserve and a graduate of Florida A&M. He was 29. Alejandro Barrios Martinez was 21. Joel Rayon Paniagua was 32. Jean Nieves Rodriguez was 27. We don't have pictures of these people. Il-Marie Rodriguez Sullivan was 24. And Paul Terrell Henry was 41 years old. We think it's important that you hear their names.